Good morning and welcome to all those who have joined us on our webinar this morning, title being Resilience in Recession, Keys to Surviving in Tough Times. So briefly, we're going to be looking at the challenges and pains that businesses are experiencing in these economic tough times, and then looking at various ways that businesses and management can create interventions and processes to help them to not only survive, but to thrive in these tough times. During the webinar, you're welcome to post any questions. I'm going to start by introducing our panel. First of all, we've got Bert Lopes, who is the National Head of Business Services and Outsourcing for BDO South Africa. We have Dr. Org Linder. Org is an independent consultant. He's also a qualified psychologist. We then have Lorraine van der Westhuizen, who's the Managing Director of StatuCore, also part of the BDO Group. And we have Pat Mogatle, who's a Director at Business Services and Outsourcing. So Bert, I want to start with you. We're experiencing economic tough times at the moment. I think certain people are hesitant to say we're in a recession, but kind of in your experience, tell us what businesses are experiencing out there in terms of pains and challenges.
Good morning, Anthony. Good morning to everyone on the webinar. Yeah, your summary says it all. Is there a recession or not? I think if we look at this as it is a bit of a global phenomenon at the moment, where some economies are either partially in recession or about to go into recession. South Africa has actually managed to bounce along. And if we look at it bouncing along from an economic perspective for the last 10 years, with either zero growth or very limited growth. So well known and documented. And the impact it's had, and taking further the COVID years, and the further impact that's had, has South Africa ever recovered from the 2008 global financial crisis? I mean, one could even say, has it ever recovered? And if you look at it, maybe we haven't sufficiently recovered. But what has that done and impacted on our private clients, corporates, and even our SME entrepreneurs? The ability to garner clients, to maintain clients, find new client base has been a challenging scenario for many. We've seen quite a lot of the industries in South Africa being quite challenged by that. We've seen the construction industry, quite a complete change in construction industry in terms of who the big players are from 10 years back to now. We've seen up-and-coming businesses and sectors coming up. So there's a start-stop on renewables, where we had a lot of initiatives on the renewable side, and then that was stopped because of government policy not being forthcoming. And now obviously there's been a complete restart. So we've had an economy of start-stop, which has had a significant impact on our private clients. And then further, just to add to it, skill shortage, where we've got unemployment, and how the private business in particular can close that gap, and how we deal with that. Higher regulation, compliance, and the need then to look at that and take it from a positive perspective, and ensure that we've got good governance in applying aspects of private business to how it conducts itself, how it conducts decisions, and how it builds resilience in everything that it does. And some people might say, but what does resilience here mean? I mean, it's more than just being a survivalist, but I expect it starts with that. But it's really how your business becomes resilient to multiple aspects of attracting skills, retaining skills, being in its market or in its sector, a player, looking at external markets, looking at the ability to bring in technology, all those aspects at play. How many of our private businesses are able to put that all working together? And so that's where in our support for business services, we often are encountering private business having that challenge, and now one can guide them through it and navigate them through it. Quite an important aspect, but a very challenging and a very exciting aspect also, because wherever you see these negatives and disadvantages, there's great ability to build on it and to thrive through it.
Thanks, Bert. Or to you, I mean, from what Bert's saying is, I mean, businesses are facing challenges from all fronts. And at the end of the day, it's the people behind the business that makes the business resilient.
True.
And to me, resilience is really about being able to bounce off the negative, get through the positive. Some might say survive. Some might say we thrive. What are the challenges from a psychological point of view do businesses face? I mean, we hear more and more businesses implementing wellness programs. It is a serious issue where people are struggling to deal with the amount of information and the pressures these days. What can businesses do to minimize this and to make the people more resilient?
Thank you, Antonio and Bert. Yes, you were quite right. There's a lot we can do about that. But let me start with the assessment of what happens at the moment, because these companies and organizations, small and medium enterprises, are under immense pressure, no question about that. But if you look at the research, we know that there are some clear genetics that you find in most of these businesses. And I like to make things simple for myself. So I've identified the age-critical issues. 4 of them I will deal with very briefly now, and the 4 others I will deal later on in a follow-up webinar. Just to name them quickly, number 1 is the communication. The communication challenges in small businesses under pressure is lacking, and I will talk about that just now. Number 2, the team dynamics is very interesting for me. Being a psychologist, that is very, very interesting stuff to look at. I will talk about that. The combination of leadership and management, I will address that. And then the work-life balance, which becomes very often a fairly emotive issue. Those are the 4 that I will deal with very briefly now. The other 4, let me just mention them, is the issue of conflict management, because all of those enterprises are under experience conflict. I would be concerned if you tell me there's no conflict. I can find that very difficult to believe. The issue of employee training, and Bert, you referred to that, the gap analysis. The skills gap analysis needs to be addressed, otherwise you're not going to make it. The second last one is the diversity issue, diversity and inclusion. Who should be in and who should be out? Who do I allow? Why do that and why not? And then the last one, which is a beautiful one, but very emotive, and that is succession planning. Who will become the boss? In family businesses, this is a major issue. Who will take over from me? And yes, hopefully we will be able to address all of them. The first 4, very quickly. It's crucial for these enterprises to talk to one another. And very often they say to me, we don't have the time. We don't have the time to go and sit and talk. We don't have the time for meetings. We need to prosper. We need to make money. And very often we say to them, yes, true. But you need to have your meetings where people can sit and they can identify what are the issues, who's going to take responsibility for that, how do I get the feedback. You need to talk to one another. If not, a lot of misunderstandings happen, and that impacts productivity. You don't apply your resources correctly. There's a lack of clarity between who is doing what, and then eventually it boils down to conflict, and that causes major upsets in small and medium enterprises. The second one, team dynamics. Very often in small teams, people have multiple roles, and some of the roles you like and some of the roles you don't like. And unfortunately, you have to do that because it is there. You must do it. On top of that, you have personality clashes, and that complicates the situation tremendously. Just for a moment, think about an introvert and an extrovert that might both be very, very efficient in what they do, yet they have a complete different approach. The operational person, as opposed, wrong term, but as opposed to the strategic person, who has a very different approach. And all of that personality clashes cause major disruption in the organization if the team do not understand that. And we can help with that because we do a lot of the personality assessments to help people to understand what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses, and where should I apply it, and very, very important, where should I not be applied? Where shouldn't I be going in the organization? Your different work styles, and we all have that. We have a different style, and that might cause major frustration within the team. And both of 3 or 4 different work styles might be equally successful, yet they have a different way of dealing with reality in the work environment. And in the end, these issues cause productivity issues, but it also causes morale issues in the team, and that it speaks for itself. In the end, the team cannot function the way they should be functioning. The leadership management, you can see I couple them. I talk about leadership management always because I need both. I need the people side and I need the business side. And the one with the other is a recipe for disaster. And very often in small businesses, the founder member would be both. And if he's clever or she's clever enough, they would realize that, you know what, there might be people in my team who's a better strategist, who's a better leader, who's a better manager for a particular function, and let me delegate that to them. It is not the end of your position. It is an addition to what you should be doing right. And the balancing of the two is a critical thing, which in small businesses often is being neglected because we need to make money, we need to make a profit at the end of the month. Therefore, the task remains the more important one, and they neglect the people side. So the critical question for me about leadership and management: do you know where you're going? Team, business, where are you? Where are you 5 years, or no, too long? Where are you 6 months, a year, 18 months from now? And do I have the right people on board that can steer the ship, that can navigate us to go there? The last point would be your work-life balance. And I said it's an emotive thing. It is, because following COVID, you all know that we are starting earlier. I start working 6 o'clock in the morning and I work until 6, 7 o'clock at night. It boils over into Saturdays. It covers Sundays. And in the end, I neglect, it comes at a price. I think I neglect the importance of my family or of other people, important people, myself, my hobbies in my personal life. The long hours cause high stress levels, burnout, blurred boundaries of responsibility. And burnout is a bad place to be because it takes a long time to recover. You don't recover that over a weekend. And if that has been done, it causes a major defect in the company. It impacts relationships. And in the end, it causes a disruptive and a lack of disruption and a lack of trust in the team. Last point I wish to make about this, where I say it's an emotive issue. In family businesses, you see it very often. Those work-life imbalance is often in the house, in my home, where the business is. That goes into the dining room tonight, and that goes into the bedroom tonight. I don't have to say more. It devastates a lot of crucial relationships if it's not being attended to. Yet, there are some resolves. I am always very careful to supply a quick recipe for success, because families or small businesses differ the one from the other. Therefore, Hein, my colleague Hein Butta, who is also a clinical psychologist who works with me, we always first have a very clear assessment of what is happening in the business before we come up with the resolve. Anthony, the others we will talk about at the next session. So I will stand with Bram now. Thank you.
Jorge, if I could just ask you, what it sounds like is really getting people aligned within a business. Because when there's toxicity, there's disagreement, there's fighting, the business cannot move forward because it cannot make decisions. What do you do when you come
Yeah.
across a situation like that? What is there an easy solution, or is it a timier solution? What is the solution?
Some of these issues can come up very, very quickly. You need to get the parties together to sit and talk. And there's a way. We have created a template to help companies to say, first thing, define the issue, give it a name, stop talking about vague things. Tell me exactly what it is. Give it a name. What is your input? How do you assess that? How do I assess that? What is your resolve and what is my resolve? And how do we put this into practice to come to a solution within a short while? Some of the issues, in particular the emotive and in the family businesses where there's some legacy, there's some old family issues, those issues often takes a long time to resolve. You don't solve them they're very easy. Some of them very quickly by people sit together and say, this is what I want. How are you going to do that? And the other person says, this is what I want to do. How can you contribute to that? And they work together and they resolve it. So both short and sweet, but also sometimes a bit longer.
Anthony, I must say what Ork touches on, and it's very obviously very specific to the business side of the people. And it starts from the owner to the manager to everyone in the team. And often the word strategy comes up. Does the organization have a strategy? But you know, the way Ork has so well articulated, the strategy starts by people talking to each other. In actual fact, understanding where you're going, and then that becomes a strategy. And that in itself formulates the alignment that we're making reference to. So strategy is a very important aspect to it. But you don't just have a strategy that you pull out of your drawer. It's part and parcel of the people and how you build that strategy. I think with that builds the resilience of a business, understanding that circle.
But we often say it is not something. We often say it is not a document. It is something in your head that you can live every day. And if you've done that, then there's very little that will be in the way. Not only to survive. We don't like the word survive. I like the word prosper, because survival is not good enough. I mean, if you survive now, you might fall over within the next 2-3 weeks in small businesses. But when you prosper, you build that resilience that we spoke about in the beginning that you mentioned. That resilience is critical for companies, not only to see the end of this month, but also to know that there's a continuation, there's sustainability. We will make it over the long run.
Absolutely, and I mean, I'm amazed by this whole process of how people get together, they align their vision. Bert, as you say, strategy comes out of it. It's who's responsible, who does what. Everybody needs to be on the same page. And ultimately, it comes down to a way of decision making. You know, we all make decisions based on, in our personal lives, based on emotional issues. But from a business point of view, you always need to consider the business and stakeholders first. So, you know, my experience with some entrepreneurs is they get the braai advice on a Sunday around the braai, couple of beers, and you know, you hear on the next week they come to you and they say, oh no, Yanni told me this and this and this. And that's great. It's great because it gives you little hints of what's happening out in the economy, but that's not good decision making because someone else tells you. It's emotional. And Lorraine, that's where I want to come to you in terms of governance, particularly in, you know, when we're talking big companies, listed companies where decision making is regulated. You've got audit committees, you've got social committees, et cetera, but in those businesses that are not public interest entities, how do they set up a structure to be able to make good decisions and not just rely on the braai advice? What does that look like, that governance structure?
Thanks, Anthony, because I'm known for giving advice around the braai. Anthony, maybe where I should start is just a bit of a sort of metaphor on what governance is, because it is something viewed in private businesses as something that belongs in your large public interest, your listed space. And to some extent, it makes sense. Some of the elements of governance would belong there, and it's statutory regulated that you should have that. But the best way for me to always explain is so that, you know, governance is a glove. It can be different sizes, can be from different material. but at the end, it's a glove. It's something that needs to fit around your hand. And that's where companies should take that away and look at governance from that perspective, because governance, everybody applies governance to some extent. It's not about having formal charters and committees for everything. It's everything that you do while working on the business as opposed to in the business. So it's all those practices and processes, policies that you have that focuses on the big picture. Big picture things are looking whether your finances are stable, what are your long-term strategies. We touched on strategy, and also an element of risk management that's important. So a smaller company or a privately owned company, not all of them are necessarily small. Some of them are considerably larger than what would be viewed as large listed or public interest entities. But these are the elements that I think creates the risk in an entity like that, because we're used to, as entrepreneurs, making decisions on the fly. We're used to making, because we trust our guts, we've got the experience, and there's no formal structure to it. And what I can tell you in the years of when I was in my own business, I also didn't practice good corporate governance. I had a boot full of slips and papers in my car that I would dump at the office every couple of weeks and ask them to just file it, please. But in essence, we do practice good corporate governance if you look at what those things are. And anybody in a business looking at governance say you can't immediately quantify the value or the benefit that you get out of it. But I can tell you one thing that I've firsthand seen and experienced by myself, the negative value of not having good corporate governance. One of those things, for example, is creating investor value in the business. So a company that practices good governance creates confidence from investors, and that could now be a financing institute or maybe somebody acquiring an equity stake in the business. And by far, in these tough times post-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID, where we've seen the positive impact that governance can have in specifically these private enterprises, is how it helps to manage the conflict. Just introducing a set of rules that we will operate by, a set of things that we will consider before we make decisions, and maybe even involving sometimes an independent party, just brings a bit of stability to the governance in these entities. So, Anthony, in summary, I would say that it's got to fit your purpose. It's got to fit the business, and you've got to get out of it what you want or what you require in the business. It's not just a tick boxing exercise. It's a recipe that I download off the internet and I apply it to my company, and there you go. It is about creating and sustaining the value in the business.
Okay. So, Lorraine, I mean, you said it's not one size fits all. As we said, there are frameworks out there. We've got King 4, et cetera, but how does one develop a bespoke governance structure or framework for, let's say, a family or large private business? What is the process you would follow?
Well, it's definitely operationally dependent, Anthony. So we break it down into a very straightforward approach. So we do start by providing structure. And the very first part in doing that is, and it sounds funny, but it's planning an annual calendar. So we look at the business and different cycles in the business, whether it's in agriculture, and we've got maybe a planting season and harvesting season. So we take operational landmarks in an annual calendar, financial year, for example. And from that, we peg certain things that need to happen. For example, budget needs to be approved. Expansion needs to be, capital investment needs to be approved. These things are pegged on a calendar. And the moment you start plotting those, it's almost like the governance plan and the framework that's required to support that develops by itself. You identify issues because another helpful tool is to do a bit of a self-evaluation from management team and to assess where the challenges are in the business, to see, do we have challenges with succession? Is decision-making centralized, or is it part of a collaborative management style? So these things, my suggestion is always to start small. Just assess the business, its operational requirements, fit the calendar, and then start assessing where the shortfalls are and try and find solutions for those.
Perfect. Pat, I want to go to you, because one of the stresses in business, particularly, let's call it sort of mid-sized businesses, family businesses, is funding. Cash flow is king, and cash flow is what makes you survive or thrive. Traditionally, people know that there are banks, and everybody knows the loops you have to jump through. But I know you've of late been out in the market looking at alternatives. Obviously, technology has changed the market a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what's out there for businesses to help them in the short and long term in terms of funding their business to reduce the risk and the stress.
Oh, thanks, Anthony. I mean, as you rightly said, it's definitely one of those where you're sitting in the market, you're saying, well, I want to grow my business, or I need my business to expand, but there's actually no funding. But the funding is actually a bedrock of your governance, your good principles that you've got in place. So as you know, Lorraine said as well, if your business is actually not a business that has things in the boot, everything is in place, your governance structure is in place, you've got a solid, you've created investor value. Then you actually can go out to market and say, okay, well, let's have a conversation with short-term funders, which is basically looking at your working capital, and they predominantly look at your cash flows. Is the business actually generating revenue or generating cash to come into the business so that when they fund you, that they'll be able to pay the money? Usually funders don't want to fund when it's times of distress. They're very wary. So if Lorraine's got his things in the boot, does not look after his finances, does not pay SARS, why would I fund a Lorraine? I want to fund someone whose business I know for a fact it's good for the money. When times were good, there was actually a solid record. Things were done properly. Lots of businesses, what they do when times are actually tough, they cut. I'll pay SARS later. I won't do that. But all of those small little things add up. Now you go to a funder and you're not funding ready. So it's important that when you go to a funder, you get funding ready way before you actually need the money. You've plotted it out. You know, in audit, there's a word that they talk about. They say, do you have a going concern risk? And it's quite interesting as entrepreneurs, we don't sit and ask ourselves, is my business a going concern? Q1 is gone now. You've gone 3 months. Are you a going concern? Have you stopped and looked at, if I go to a big bank, is my business bankable? And unfortunately, if you're not bankable, you will not get the funding from the long-term funders or even the short-term funders. So it's important that you ask yourself, is your business a good business, and is it actually running on good principles? But are you a going concern? Very, very important.
Right. I think there's some great there's great alignment between what we're talking strategy and from a governance point of view, if those charged with governance are looking at going concern. Pat, what does going concern mean in terms of the runway you're looking ahead? What does it mean when you're getting yourself funding ready?
Yeah, look, I mean, the runway, effectively, some funders are different. So let's talk to large guys, the bankers. They will probably look for 3 years historical financial statements, either audited or reviewed. So they'd want that. They'd also want to know, let's look at your, call it 12-month forecast, 24-month forecast, but is it backed by contracts? Do you have specific contracts that you have to fulfill? Are the numbers sound and proof? Because a lot of the times as entrepreneurs, and every entrepreneur does this, the glass is always half full. You're going to be, the greatest entrepreneur, you're the next Steve Jobs. But funders need to sit and assess and say, well, is it viable? What have you done? Track record? Where are we getting the money going forward? Is it possible? The short-term funders are a little bit different. They then saying, okay, let's actually look at your cash flows, but they're limited to about 5 million. Some push it to about 8 million. And they will look at the cash coming in and out and say, okay, well, we can give you a runway of about 12 months. You can pay us in 12 months, but they give you upfront. So if you take $1 million, they'll tell you you're going to pay 1.3 million, and this is how you're going to pay it off. It is unsecured, so it's a little bit of a different game there. But again, you have to have the systems in place so that you can be able to get that funding across the board.
Pat, are those, let's call it flexible lenders where you don't have to mortgage the earth, are they readily available out in the market?
They're definitely readily available, Anthony, and we work as BDO, we work with quite a lot of them. I mean, lots of Genfin, Bridgement, Inventfin, Swipe Finance. There's a lot of them that are readily available within the market where you literally, it's in 24 hours you can get funding. But as we said, if you're not ready for the funding, if you don't have cash flows, your bank statements are all over the place, you don't have invoices, you can't prove that you've got contracts, then you can't get a cent, unfortunately. And the problem is we always want to go to the doctor when that headache is actually at its worst. But you could have gone when you could see the signs that I've got a blurry eyesight. What's going on here? you will see the red flags quite early. You know that you've got a runway of 12 months, but the business does not have enough cash flows. How do I get to a point where I've got proper working capital? I've got a contract, it pays me 90 days, but can I get money now so that I can run for the 90 days? Because effectively, you're funding that business for that 90 days. And I think it's a universal problem in South Africa where, SMEs, private business, the invoices are being paid late by big corporates, and the bloodline for small business is the cash flows. So if you're needing cash flows, there's a lot of small funders. And we definitely can have, in future webinars, we bring them on board where guys can actually come and ask them questions about how do you run these algorithms in the background. I mean, some of them use your cloud-based solutions where it pulls the information, pulls your trading history, and then they fund you off that. Some just want 6-month bank statements, and they want you to be in business for at least a year. Some want $1 million in revenue, some 50,000 in revenue a month. It really depends funder to funder, but there is solutions for our entrepreneurs.
Bert, I want to go back to you. Yes, sorry.
Pat made a very important comment, and that is about identifying the red flags, Pat. I think that is critical. And unless the enterprise spends some time to check what is happening and where are we good at, what are we good at, and what are we not good at, they neglect that part, and then they realize that too late. In my experience with them, very often people say to me, if only I've worked on this issue that I know is there 3 or 4 months ago, I would have been in a much better position to resolve it. But the red flag issue very often is sort of neglected because the pressure is on. We need to make money. and very quickly you run out of it. So I like that comment about checking the red flags. That's a deliberate process to identify the issues in time.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, Lorraine, you also mentioned about working on your business instead of in your business. Working in your business can create tunnel vision. And it's quite important that people are able to stand back, look at the issues, and based on the back to you in terms of your experience with clients and consulting, what are some of the practical things you can help businesses with to get them funding ready and then to maintain that status going forward, as Pat mentioned?
Well, Anthony, in addition to having all your records and paperwork in place, and obviously having your SARS affairs in order to ensure that, I think it's also, anybody investing in your business will need to have faith in what you are trying to sell them. Because at the end of the day, that's the transaction that's happening. I'm selling my dream, I'm selling my idea of business. And if you buy into that dream, then you might be willing, you consider the risk of investing it. And minimizing that risk is where good corporate governance comes in, where a healthy and a stable business environment supports you. But in any type of investor buying into your dream and investing in you, it's about your understanding of the business and showing that you have the risk. So you've got to have in your mind, be ready be able to answer questions in the form of a business plan almost. So there must be some formal structure to it. Things like this, funding is not acquired by merely picking up the phone unless you have an existing relationship with someone and it's proven in the past to pay off for such an investor. But it's not just done by just having a meeting and explaining things. You've got to formalize the business, and Pat can maybe better testify to this, but I would think that at the outset already is to show that you understand a lot of things. You're not just coming in with some idea, I want to start building this and I need 100 million to do so. It is to show that you've applied your mind. It is to show that you've instilled the necessary checks and balances in the business to ensure that risk is mitigated to some extent. So that formal, whether it's a full business plan, maybe a limited business plan, where you do a proper analysis of the risks and the threats to the business, but also analyze the opportunities and show that you've done your homework and your research. I think, Anthony, is the critical part in obtaining not just finance, but also you want to obtain the right finance. You don't want to pay too expensive for it on interest rate. You certainly don't want any gangster finance maybe for your business. And also I mean, any investor or funder will mitigate their own risk. So you'll have certain restrictions or requirements to that funding. And you certainly don't want to end up in a position where something might go wrong and you lose the bulk of your equity in your business because you put it up as security. So those are the things that you need to consider. And to me, I would personally not go into or venture into anything like that without having the right advisors. And I'm not doing this as a sales pitch. It's because I might not have the right experience on all aspects, whether it's legal, whether it's finance, governance maybe, or even doing the necessary market research. So I would certainly engage with the right team to assist me in obtaining such finance.
Perfect. Bert, I just want to go to you. What can you add to what Ray said in terms of the outsourcing services that your division performs to help clients to maintain and be in a position where everything's in order? What does that all mean?
Well, thanks, Anthony. I mean, the team has summarized some great aspects of a business, the challenges it faces, and some of the solutions that it can already apply. So our approach is really understanding what our clients need, and having a conversation with them, understanding those abilities, because sometimes they might see they need something. Let's say they need a set of accounts, management accounts, or they need payroll services, and they're seeing it from a narrow perspective. When you have a conversation with them, often one is dependent on the other. They might need payroll because there's something else actually as a symptom causing an issue. Maybe it's because they're losing people. Maybe it's because they spread out across Africa. They don't have the ability to service their own base. So it's understanding some of the issues that are resulting in the symptom that can then help us in actually supporting our clients. And we pride ourselves in listening to our clients and focusing on what they need. And then we fortunate in having, from our internal perspective, quite a wide selection of capabilities and skill sets that we can also align with our clients, whether it's from a risk management perspective, whether it's governance support, and then also very specific to business lines, corporate governance, corporate finance, taxation services. So we, depending on what's needed. I mean, we're definitely not an organization that wants to just go and sell to clients. That is not our aim. In actual fact, our aim is to help our clients to survive. It's pointless to just try and sell to a client because it's going to be a short-term gain. We're in it for the long run, and our clients become supportive and work with us, and we become much more of a trusted advisor. So those are the aspects of where we can build from a business services and resilience to helping our clients. We can help in guiding strategy. We can also help in guiding some of their strategy in terms of global markets, because we get ourselves involved in that. So from it's not only an internal focus. Sometimes you've got to have the external focus on your clients, focus on the markets that you're wanting to focus on, and there we can provide some guidance to that. And then obviously very much to the internal, because a lot of it we've been focusing on the internal side of our people, the management, raising finance, and the governance, but very important to focus on the outside world.
Good. Before we go to a question, or maybe we can go to you. In terms of what Bert said, obviously you have a professional advisor who helps you in terms of compliance. There are various aspects to business. I know some people believe when you go into business, you should start with an exit strategy. Obviously, Bert's team can help with valuations, forecasts, everything to help you plan that journey. And we're touching a little bit here on succession planning. What's your view on the drive and the psychology behind business people planning for the future? Because no one person can stay in charge forever. As someone recently said in the press, you better leave before you get kicked out. What is the psychology and what is your experience in seeing how people plan for succession?
It's a great question, and Bert, thank you for the description, because the sustainability of the organization is so critical and so important. And if you don't have the continuation of leadership and management, this thing is going to fall over. It will not survive. And so often you see that in small businesses where there was a manager, there was a leader, and as long as that person was there, everything went well. And then that person either passed on or whatever happened, and then the whole business sort of falls over. It takes a little bit of maturity, Antoni, to discuss this issue in your business and to say to people, I will not be here I will not be here for keeps. And the formal and coaching is critically important to me. I'm a big fan of proper mentorship, where you identify these individuals with the right potential and the skills are transferred, and that person is prepared for a time where I will stand back and where you will take over. And that can be a gradual process. It is not a once-off. It is not Friday I stop and Monday you start. It's devastating to companies. But if you have that if you have that process where you can gradually bring in the right caliber people, but it starts with a mature person who is perhaps at the top and who says, guys, I have 5 or 6 or 10 years, and I often, and I know it makes people uncomfortable, I often ask managers, who's going to take over from me if the bus runs you over to this afternoon? What happens with the organization? And people would say, there are people. I said, who are they? And are they prepared to take over? Are they there that can to maintain the sustainability of the organization and actually to do better? I mean, I had the discussion earlier this morning with one of my colleagues about our kids. I have 4 children, 4 boys, and they are luckily out of my household and out of my life and out of my person. They are doing their own thing. And that is great to have them where they are. But it also took some time for me to say there will be a time where I am not taking care of you anymore, where you need to move on, and I can help you to equip you with the right kind of attitude and behavior and skills, but there's a point where I will withdraw. And that kind of discussion, as comfortable as it is, needs to happen in the enterprise where the manager says, that is my deadline, that is where I will move on, and who will I prepare? And critically, who will I not prepare? And that is another emotive discussion to say to somebody in your team, you know what, I don't see in you the ability or the potential to take over this business. This is harsh. It's devastating to people. But rather that than telling them everybody is fine and everybody might survive this, they will not survive, and the company will fall over, in particular the small companies, because they don't have the capacity to survive these kind of upheavals. You need to talk to them in time. I sit with a couple of family businesses where the matriarch or the patriarch, the only technical ability they have is to send faxes, and the problem with that is that they have very well equipped people in their team, and these people sit around idling because they don't know when is this old man or the old lady moving on so that we can take over. It has never been discussed, and it is a sacred cow. People don't talk about that. Get real, get mature, talk about that, and tell them, when will I do the exit thing? And like you say, define the exit strategy for yourself. I love that, where people say, this is where I will be going. But en route there, I will make sure that the capacity of people is being developed to take over and to maintain and to improve.
Absolutely. And I think while you were talking, Org, I was just thinking of what Pat said about going concern. We tend to think going concerners cannot produce enough cash for the foreseeable future. But in 6 months, 6 years' time, 5 years' time, who's there to take over if something happens? Is there a backup plan? And I think it fits into the whole governance structure that Lorraine was talking about. A different business, maybe big corporate business, they have to look at management structures, they have to look at the strategy. Is there a right CEO for this phase of the business life? whereas a family business is very different. The right skills. I always remember that there was a comment in my experience. Someone once said, you know, you pay your family in a family business. You pay some of them to stay and some of them to stay away.
Yes,
So
yes.
you've got to have that glove for the specific business. But
Yes.
I just want to go to a question from Daniel for Pat. Pat, Daniel is just saying that some new startups don't have history. So let's say you're in your first or second year, maybe you don't even have a long history with SaaS. You're trying to establish yourselves. You don't have proper governance. You don't have that funding readiness that a company of 5 years, 3 years plus has. What can those companies do? I mean, what advice can you offer?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, it's a great question because actually 4%, if you go and look at what the Department of Trade and Industry and Small Business Department says, in South Africa, only 4% of startups are actually funded. And it just tells you that, I mean, if you compare that to Silicon Valley, all the big companies that we today use and we don't even think about, your Airbnbs, are from Silicon Valley, and they came out of that funding of a seed funding where there was actually nothing. So someone bought into the vision and they actually said, we believe in it, we hope it works, and if it doesn't work, we're in trouble. So those companies today have worked. Unfortunately, in SA, it's not the same model. It is quite difficult to get funding off the bat. But if you register your company with CRPC, you've got a proper business account, you've got an email that you're not sending your emails out of your Gmail, send out of the business account. You know, it's a small little semantics that when you're doing a proposal, it's professional. The letter's got a letterhead. All those things, when you're pitching to clients and trying to get work or trying to get revenue, it actually says, yes, you might be a startup, but I see the effort, I see what you're doing. Therefore, let me give you a small piece of work. So I look at startups like say, iPad want to run the 90-kilometer Comrades. It's now in June. There's no chance. I weigh 92. I've never ran in like 5 years. So there's no ways I'm going to do it. So a startup, I need to run in my neighborhood 2 kilometers for the next, call it 3-4 months. Then I'll go and run a 10K. Then I'll do JP Morgan. Then I'll go do a 42, then a 90. So a lot of the times what startups do, they want to run a 90-kilometer. It's impossible to run a 90-kilometer because your body is not ready yet. So as you start, get the fundamentals right, build it up step by step. It's like a baby. A baby starts off by crawling, then falls, crawls, starts walking, then they'll start running. So startups, put together the right team from day one. It's so important to have the right team from day one and build up the business step by step. Start by selling to your family members. I mean, Ork said, you know, you've got family members there, and you rightly said, Anthony, you pay some of them to stay away. So before they're going to stay away, they must pay you to get the business going.
Yeah, I suppose what you're saying is you're building credibility. In a way, when you're starting small, you're saying, look, I'm linked to so many things that I'm not going to disappear tomorrow. You'll be able to trace me and find me. I'm not a fly-by-night. I've got some credibility. And I think also one of the good lessons in life is by building it slowly is if you grow too fast, the biggest problem you have, unless you've got a cash business, is you run out of cash. And thus, that creates a risk on itself, particularly from a going concern point of view, and creates even more stress. Lorraine, just another question that came in is, at what point in the growth of a startup is governance relevant, and what are good metrics to say, I now need to introduce governance?
Well, it's a simple one, Anthony. On the date of incorporation, governance becomes relevant. Look, it's again not a full scope or governance in the full sense of the word, but when we manage a business, and you won't be successful in a business if you don't take the big picture view, if you don't take the longer term strategic view of your business. You might, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I mean, your chances of success in applying good corporate governance is far better, and that's been proven. So for me, from day one, you need to get the basics right. Like I said earlier, I paid the penalties when I sold for the box of slips and documents in the boot. I can testify firsthand that if governance was applied from the start, the upside would have been far better. But in doing so, you know, for me, it's always encouraging when I see clients phone us and say, where can I learn more about my duties as a director, for example? How do I understand the liabilities that I have? What does fiduciary duty mean? What does it mean to act in good faith? Can I use, and I mean, that's a trap that a lot of entrepreneurial services or entities fall into, very difficult to unravel. And for the corporate finance guys, depending on who you act for, something that can penalize the value is when they start sort of muddying the waters of personal expenses and business expenses. When you start up, it might look healthy to pay for your groceries out of the business account, make it a bit tax deductible. There's things that you might get VAT back from that you won't get in your personal expenses. And that's always the challenge, because now you grow, you get to a point, and now you've got to go and convince somebody that, hold on, it looks like I'm making no profit, but that's because I structured my business and my personal experience for tax benefits. So getting those things, trading sensibly, meeting your commitments, acting lawfully, is very critical. It doesn't look so or like that in the short term when you start off. I know it pains to pay your taxes. It's like that all around the world, but those are the types of things. That's the groundwork for building a strong, resilient business. It lays the groundwork for good corporate governance throughout. On top of that, there's a couple of things that I mean, I never practiced those until I started preaching. And now I can see what the value is in small things that you do, that as an entrepreneur, I never documented plans or decisions. In selling a stake in a business, at some point somebody said to me, why did you come to this conclusion? And I had to rely on memory, which is poor at the best of times, to try and answer a simple question, because there's no resolution, there's no minutes, there's no document of why we did what we did. Another thing we never did, which I now always advise any form of a business, the large companies do that by default, is measure your business performance and manage risk. And you can do that very easily. You don't have to involve a complex sort of financial metrics into your business every time that you want to measure it. But you can measure year on year if you are growing in your bottom line. Are you growing the value of your business in the market? Applying some business valuation model at a set multiple and measuring that year on year, and set goals and targets on how you want to grow, the return on investment that you put in. And then lastly, managing the risks from day one, Anthony. And it's, like I said, it's the foundation from where the building blocks just gets added as you grow the business. Because understanding, even if you start off with, my business only has 3 main risks, what is the severity of any of those risks and the likelihood and the impact that it has on the business if it happens. If you don't force yourself to look at it, you might overlook it in good times. And then when the bad times come, you are not ready to mitigate those risks and to address it. So those elements are foundationally, the day that you incorporate the business, you should start applying those.
So I think what we're gleaning from this is a healthy business is one that's got a strategy. For the owner or owners, there could be an exit strategy. And we hear many good stories about people who've sold, good exit strategy, made their money. And the important thing is about governance from day one. To answer Daniel's question, is actually that the business can eventually stand on its own 2 feet. You can go on 6 weeks holiday and it still is producing cash. Or just a question for you, is that what importance do you place on talent recognition and involvement of key staff in management strategy or business strategy?
Now, I saw the question from Colofelo. Colofelo, that is a great question. Yes, please make sure that you understand what skills you have available and what skills you do not have available, so that when you bring in people, you bring in the right kind of person. But there's also another side to me. If I know what your strengths are, I know where to apply you, but I also know where to not apply you. And I think that to me is often in a small enterprise more important to get the right person in the position, and not because there is a person available to apply him or her to that particular exercise or whatever the case might be. So yes, please, talent management is critical. Identify that, and the wise managers The wise leaders, they can check out their people and they can see what they are good at. They can also see what they are not good at. And if that is within their reach and within their budget, you can develop some of that. But some of the inefficiencies take such a long time to develop, and it might be very, very expensive, where you rather than need to decide, I will rather apply you where you are beneficial to my organization, and I will keep you away, Anthony, your words earlier, I will keep you away from where you might do some harm. Don't do that. But it is critical for you to know who I have on board and why do I have them on board. Colovello, great question. Thank you.
Great. Or if I may ask, I know we've got about 5 minutes. I just want to remind everybody that there is a survey online. If everybody could just complete that for us. But before I ask everybody just to give their final comments, or what defines a toxic environment? And I know this is probably not a quick answer, but what does one do to sort out and fix a toxic environment, which means the values are probably not aligned to the vision?
The shortest answer I can give you, Anthony, is to say to people, identify them. Don't bargain for that. Don't budget for that. Identify them, and then if you have them on board, take them. If there are 5 or 6 or 7 critical downs in your organization, identify them and deliberately compile a process where I can say, number 1, this is it. I need to address that. I need to do away with it. I need to rectify that, and then build on number 2, number 3. But the process starts with clever management sitting down and say, guys, what are we lacking? Or what are the toxic issues? What is the one thing that is really devastating our productivity and our output? Identify them and don't live with them, because they are there. The emotional side of that, it might be a family member that I need to address, that I need to get rid of. It's hard words, it's hard language, but that I need to have a difficult discussion with, to say, you're not living up to our expectations. That is the emotive side of it, but identify them and address them. That is not complicated, difficult, but not complicated.
So I suppose the key thing is for management or the CEO to drive a culture of honesty and transparency.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to ask everybody, the panelists, just for 30 seconds each, just give me your final advice or thoughts for people to apply, to be able to survive and thrive in tough economic times. Bert, do you want to lead that?
Thanks, Anthony. I mean, a great summary by everyone in terms of some of the points. I mean, we've just taking some key words. People could just stick to some key words, but structure has been spoken a lot. People and strategy. I mean, we know the old saying, strategy or structure follows strategy. So set your strategy first. But the one key aspect that, and going back to, we started in the beginning, communication. Communication is actually what cements everything, and driving that communication. No matter how small an organization you are, communication with your suppliers, with your clients, communication with your own people internally, communication plays such a vital role. And how often when one backtracks, you see that the biggest negative was because you didn't communicate. You always think that communication is, I'll get back to it in another day. And just to leave one last passing comment, which our ex-CEO, you always like to tell us, bad news doesn't get better the next day. So rather deal with communication.
Thanks, Bert. What a wonderful saying. Or quickly in 20 seconds, any wise words?
Bert has said it all. It's great stuff. You are the small and medium enterprise are the backbone of our economy. We cannot survive without you. Thank you, Bert. You've said all that needs to be said about that.
Fantastic. Or
Yeah, I would just say, Anthony, find the glove that fits and fits the purpose and commit to it.
Perfect. Pat?
Yeah, from my side, I think, run your business as if you're running a big corporate. because you're going to need it to have that structure in place the day you need that money. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and I hope you've gleaned some useful advice or information. Please remember the survey, and also should anyone want to contact any of the panelists, please, we will put up the email address. I think it's bso.co.za, but also you can also connect via the chat if you want to. So thanks very much, and have a good day.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank